Men, the most revealing conflicts in relationships aren't the ones that happen naturally over genuine disagreements. Before we start, hit subscribe, smash that like button, and drop a comment saying, "I've been tested," if you've ever been confused why she started a fight over something that made no sense. Your engagement helps other men recognize when they're being tested rather than having genuine discussions. Argument 1. The hypothetical jealousy scenario. She brings up a completely hypothetical situation involving you and another woman. What you would do if an ex reached out, how you'd respond if a coworker flirted with you, or what you'd say if an attractive woman approached you. When you answer, she finds fault with your response and turns the hypothetical into a real argument about your intentions, values, or whether you actually care about her feelings. What she's actually testing. This argument tests whether you'll accept responsibility for imaginary situations and whether she can control your behavior through creating fictional scenarios. She's measuring if you'll defend yourself against accusations about things that haven't happened, which reveals whether you'll accept being put on trial for her imagination. She's also testing whether you'll modify your responses to please her, showing her she can shape your behavior through threatening conflict. Notice how the hypothetical is constructed. If it's designed so any answer creates a problem, too detailed means you've thought about it, too vague means you're hiding something, too confident means you're not considering her feelings. She's not actually asking for information. She's created a trap where the goal is the argument itself, not your answer. Watch what happens when you try to dismiss it as hypothetical. If she escalates by insisting you need to take it seriously, that your answer reveals something real about your character, or that refusing to engage means you're defensive, she's demanding you treat her imagination as reality. This reveals she believes her feelings about fictional scenarios deserve the same weight as actual events. Pay attention to whether your actual behavior contradicts the concern. If you've never given her reason to doubt your loyalty, but she's still creating jealousy scenarios, she's not worried about real threats. She's manufacturing insecurity to justify controlling behavior. If your history shows faithfulness and appropriate boundaries, but she's still testing you with hypotheticals, the test isn't about trust, it's about compliance. Observe how she responds to logical or dismissive answers. If you point out the situation hasn't happened and isn't likely to happen, and she becomes more upset at your refusal to engage emotionally with fiction, she needs you to take her feelings about imaginary situations as seriously as real ones. This establishes that her emotions about nothing are your responsibility to manage. Why this is a value test? This is a value test because she's measuring whether you'll accept being held accountable for things that exist only in her mind. High-value men recognize the difference between addressing real concerns and validating fictional ones. If you engage seriously with hypothetical jealousy scenarios, you're demonstrating you'll accept responsibility for her insecurity regardless of your actual behavior, which signals low value and weak boundaries. Argument 2. The delayed reaction blow-up. She seems fine about something in the moment. You made a joke, mentioned plans with friends, or made a decision she was present for. Hours or even days later, she brings it up as a serious problem, claims she was hurt by it, and starts an argument about something you thought was resolved or never an issue. The delayed reaction catches you off guard because you're arguing about something that seemed perfectly fine when it happened. What she's actually testing. This argument tests whether she can retroactively define situations as problematic and whether you'll accept that her delayed processing makes you responsible for apologizing for things that weren't issues at the time. She's measuring if you'll question your own memory and perception of events when she reframes them as hurtful, which shows her whether she can control the narrative even for things you both experienced. Notice what types of situations get the delayed reaction. If they're consistently things where you demonstrated independence, made choices without her approval, or set boundaries she didn't like, she's not processing hurt feelings. She's punishing boundaries after the fact. The delay gives her time to construct why your reasonable behavior was actually wrong. Watch how she explains why she didn't say something at the time. If her explanation is that she was too hurt, too shocked, or needed time to process, she's establishing that you should have known she was upset, despite her giving no indication. This makes you responsible for reading her mind, or assuming any moment of your independence might secretly be hurting her. Pay attention to whether she acknowledges that it seemed fine at the time. If she insists she showed signs of being upset that you missed, she's rewriting history to make her delayed reaction your failure of observation. If she admits it seemed fine, but claims you should have known better anyway, she's requiring you to anticipate problems that don't exist yet. Observe what resolution looks like. If the only acceptable outcome is you apologizing for something that wasn't wrong when it happened, she's training you that any past behavior can become a present problem if she decides it should be. This makes you constantly vulnerable to retrospective judgment, which keeps you careful about everything you do. Why this is a value test? This is a value test because she's measuring whether you'll let her retroactively define reality and accept responsibility for her delayed processing. High-value men don't apologize for things that weren't problems when they happened. If you accept that her delayed reaction makes you wrong about something that was fine in the moment, you're demonstrating she can control not just present interactions, but past ones too, which signals weak frame and low value. Argument 3. The boundary-pushing demand. She makes an unreasonable request, expecting you to cancel important plans to accommodate her spontaneous ones, demanding access to your phone or social media, or requiring you to cut contact with a friend she doesn't like. When you refuse or push back, she starts an argument claiming that your boundary means you don't care about her, don't prioritize the relationship, or are hiding something. What she's actually testing. This argument tests whether your boundaries are real or just suggestions she can override by questioning your commitment. She's measuring if you'll sacrifice reasonable boundaries to prove you care, which shows her whether guilt and accusation are effective tools for getting compliance. She's also testing how much of yourself you'll compromise to avoid conflict, revealing whether she can gradually expand control by framing boundaries as problems. Notice how she frames your boundary. If maintaining reasonable limits gets characterized as you being selfish, secretive, or uncommitted, she's deliberately misrepresenting boundaries as character flaws. If she claims that people in relationships don't have the boundary you're maintaining, she's using relationship expectations as leverage while ignoring that healthy relationships respect autonomy. Watch whether she accepts compromise or whether only complete compliance satisfies her. If you offer middle ground, sharing some information but not everything, adjusting plans but not cancelling completely, and she rejects anything short of full capitulation, the demand isn't about meeting her needs. It's about testing whether you'll fold completely when pressured. Pay attention to how she responds to explanations about why the boundary exists. If you explain the practical, emotional, or relational reasons for your limit, and she dismisses all justification as excuses, she doesn't actually want to understand. She wants compliance. If she cannot or will not acknowledge that your boundary is reasonable, it's because she's not interested in reason. Observe whether the demands escalate over time. If you give in once and later face bigger demands, she learned that pressure works and is expanding her testing. If boundaries you maintained early in the relationship are suddenly being challenged, she's testing whether you've become more compliant as emotional investment has increased. Why this is a value test? This is a value test because she's measuring whether you maintain your boundaries when challenged or whether you can be guilted into compliance. High-value men hold boundaries even when accused of not caring, because they recognize that sacrificing reasonable autonomy doesn't prove love, it proves willingness to be controlled. If you abandon boundaries to avoid conflict, you're demonstrating low value and teaching her that pressure works. Argument 4. The tone policing trap. She asks a question or makes a statement, you respond normally, and she starts an argument about your tone, claiming you were dismissive, condescending, or rude even though your words were neutral. She escalates the conflict from the content of what you said to how you said it, making the discussion about your delivery rather than the actual topic, and requiring you to defend tone rather than substance. What she's actually testing. This argument tests whether she can make you responsible for her interpretation of your delivery rather than the actual words you used. She's measuring if you'll accept that her feelings about how you said something matter more than what you actually said, which shows her whether she can win arguments by shifting focus from content to tone whenever the content doesn't support her position. Notice when tone policing happens. If it consistently occurs when you're disagreeing with her, setting a boundary, or expressing an opinion she doesn't like, she's not actually bothered by your tone. She's using tone accusations to derail conversations that aren't going her way. If your tone is only wrong when you're saying things she doesn't want to hear, the problem isn't delivery. Watch whether she can provide specific evidence of the tone problem. If she can't explain what words or phrases were said in what way that was problematic, just insists you know what you did, she's making a feeling-based accusation you cannot defend against. If she admits your words were fine, but claims your energy or vibe was off, she's requiring you to manage imperceptible elements of communication. Pay attention to whether your tone would be acceptable from her or others. If she regularly uses the exact tone she's criticizing from you, direct, brief, matter of fact, her issue isn't tone consistency but tone hierarchy. She can communicate in ways you're not allowed to, establishing that rules apply differently based on who has more power in the dynamic. Observe what happens when you adjust your tone. If you speak more carefully and she still finds fault, the problem was never really tone. It was that you weren't agreeing with her. If making your tone excessively gentle and careful becomes the only acceptable communication style, she's conditioning you to speak to her as if she's fragile or superior, which reinforces power imbalance. Why this is a value test? This is a value test because she's measuring whether you'll accept being put on defense for imperceptible or fabricated delivery issues, distracting from the actual content of disagreement. High-value men address the substance of discussions and refuse to get derailed by subjective complaints about tone. If you start carefully managing your delivery to avoid tone accusations, you're demonstrating she can control not just what you say, but how you say it, which signals low value. Argument 5. The comparison complaint. She starts an argument by comparing you unfavorably to other men. Her ex did something you don't do, her friend's boyfriend does things better, or random men she knows treat their partners differently than you treat her. The comparison is designed to make you feel inadequate and spur you to defend yourself or promise to do better, turning into an argument about whether you're measuring up to her standards based on other men. What she's actually testing. This argument tests whether you'll compete with other men for her approval, and whether you derive your sense of worth from comparison to others, rather than internal standards. She's measuring if you'll feel threatened by references to other men and change behavior to prove you're better, which shows her whether competition anxiety motivates you, or whether you're secure in your own value, regardless of others. Notice which men get invoked for comparison. If it's her ex, she's testing whether mentioning him creates insecurity that makes you try harder. If it's friends' partners, she's using social comparison to establish standards. If it's random men she barely knows, she's manufacturing comparisons from insufficient data, revealing the comparison itself is the point rather than legitimate observation. Watch how she frames the comparison. If she presents other men's behavior as superior without acknowledging trade-offs, different circumstances, or that she's receiving selective information, she's deliberately creating unfair comparison. If she ignores ways you exceed other men while highlighting only areas where they exceed you. She's cherry-picking to manufacture inadequacy. Pay attention to whether the compared behavior is actually important to her or just available ammunition. If she's never mentioned caring about the specific thing until she could compare you unfavorably about it, the behavior isn't genuinely important. It's a convenient criticism. If she doesn't actually want you to do the thing she's comparing, she just wants the leverage comparison provides. Observe how she responds if you point out ways you exceed the comparison. If mentioning areas where you do more or better gets dismissed, minimized, or turned into a character flaw, you're being defensive, you're making it a competition, you don't care about her specific concern. She doesn't actually want balanced comparison. She wants you feeling inadequate. Why this is a value test? This is a value test because she's measuring whether you derive value from external comparison and competition or from internal standards and self-assurance. High-value men don't feel threatened by comparisons to other men because their worth isn't determined by being superior to someone else. If you defend yourself against comparison or promise to do better to measure up, you're demonstrating insecurity and external validation needs, which signals low value. Argument 6. The historical grievance ambush. She brings up something from weeks, months, or even years ago that you thought was resolved, forgiven, or never that serious. The old issue gets presented as current evidence of a pattern, or as something she never really got over, turning into an argument about whether you can be trusted, whether you've really changed, or whether she can feel secure given your past behavior. What she's actually testing. This argument tests whether anything is ever truly resolved, or whether you remain perpetually accountable for past mistakes, regardless of apologies, changes, or time past. She's measuring if she can use history as permanent ammunition and whether you'll accept that nothing you do can fully erase past errors, which shows her whether she has unlimited leverage through maintaining a catalogue of grievances. Notice what triggers the historical revival. If old issues resurface during new conflicts, she's using history to strengthen current arguments when her present case is weak. If past mistakes get mentioned when you're succeeding, happy, or asserting boundaries, she's using history to cut you down when you're displaying too much confidence or independence. Watch how she characterizes the past issue. If she claims she never really forgave it, never really moved past it, or always had doubts, she's retroactively rewriting the resolution process to maintain grievance. If at the time she accepted your apology and moved forward, her current claim that she never forgave it is strategic revision to maintain perpetual leverage. Pay attention to whether you actually repeated the behavior or whether she's using a single past incident to predict pattern. If you made a mistake once, corrected it, and never did it again, but she's using it as evidence you'll always do it, she's not making logical predictions. She's maintaining fear and control. Past behavior that was addressed and changed shouldn't be permanent character evidence. Observe what resolution looks like for historical grievances. If there's no amount of time, change, or demonstration that can fully erase a past mistake, she's maintaining permanent debt. If every conflict brings up history, regardless of relevance, she's using accumulated grievances as continuous leverage rather than addressing issues and moving forward. Why this is a value test. This is a value test because she's measuring whether you'll accept permanent accountability for past errors, regardless of growth, change, or time elapsed. High-value men address past mistakes, make amends, and improve, but they don't accept perpetual punishment for resolved issues. If you keep apologizing for the same historical grievance or accept that your past means you have no standing in current conflicts, you're demonstrating low value and allowing her to maintain superior moral position indefinitely.